So, yeah, so good evening, I guess. Good evening, everyone. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this. So, uh, yeah, we're going to have to wing it a bit. But my name is Gerry, and I'm here to speak with Neha Sinha, who's the author of Wild and Wilful. And so, Neha, you live in Delhi, but you live in Delhi, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, there's a lot of Delhi in the book. Uh, you make Delhi sound really magical, but why write a book like this? What inspired you?
Um, well, the correct answer is the fact that I love animals, and I don't find enough of them in books. And when I was growing up, I used to read books which had fantasy settings in which the animals were friendly and they would speak. Until I realized that animals actually are, even if they don't speak, they're actually super interesting and quite friendly in the sense that if you know how they behave, they're not going to hurt you. And I don't find enough scientific books that are approachable. So I thought that I should write one because I either find very serious stuff, which is very dry and difficult to understand, or I find stuff that's a fantasy realm in which the animals are talking. There's kind of nothing in the middle. And
Okay.
of course, I've studied conservation biology, but I find reading journal articles very tedious. And I feel that our work is not done until we make that animal, if not lovable, then at least sort of make it appear the way that it is. That is, it's a wild animal. It does what it does because it has to survive. Snakes are not evil. Leopards, every leopard is not a man eater. Crocodiles are not sitting there crying crocodile tears. And the media, like they say, the media is vulture. Media is a vulture. That's a very common statement. And vultures are so gentle. They have this whole bunch of stupid ideas around animals, and it kind of enrages me because I feel that somebody needs to wipe the slate clean and start again. So the idea was to write a popular book, which is also, like, of course, based on facts, but
Hmm.
also written in a literary style, which maybe a common person who doesn't like animals may like to read. If somebody hates animals, I hope they can read this book and just maybe like them a bit more. That's
Okay.
just.
Yeah, yeah. There's also, I mean, there's a lot of pain in your writing as well. I mean, the uh, the leopard that was captured. I mean, I uh, I've been privy to situations like that as well, and um, there is. I feel also. I feel there's a lot of us wanting, feeling that we have to do something about everything that is around us. Uh, and one thing that I believe personally is that sometimes it's better just not to do stuff. So as far as leopards go, I mean, I believe it's better to have leopards around than otherwise. My mentor Rom Whitaker once, when they lost one dog to a leopard, and soon after that he mentioned to me, it's good to have a predator around. It keeps you on your toes. And
Yeah.
if you think about it, we wonder whether a predator is going to be able to get us, even though these predators don't particularly want us at all. In most places, except for a couple of really small pockets, most places leopards are absolutely safe. I mean, we have a leopard here, and we've caught him on camera trap recently, and it's absolutely fine. We, touchwood, have not lost any of our dogs yet. We have lost a sheep once, but India used to be a place where that was okay. And I remember, 20, 25 years ago, actually, no, I'm older than that, so maybe 30 years ago, I remember seeing an old lady sweeping a cobra out of her house. Okay.
Mm.
And with absolute, nonchalance, it was just something that had to be done. Cobra at the house, okay, sweep it out. Today, everyone goes into geosynchronous orbit. We have to call a rescuer. We have to call a forest department. There needs to be a helpline. The snake has to be caught. We have to move it away. So, what do you think has caused this shift from such incredible tolerance that we used to have, where it was sort of que sera, to now where we feel that something needs to be done. The Wildlife Institute of India, as you mentioned, pretty much burnt down a forest. because there was a leopard in it?
This is something that bothers me so much, especially because I'm a woman and we're always told what to do. There are always boxes we have to be in and how we have to behave. There's so much control that's exerted over women. And I see, similar ways in which we try to exert control over animals, especially wild animals. Of course, domestic animals as well. But I think we believe that we own the world. We don't feel that we are part of it. We feel that we own it. And wildlife conservation today is about fences. It is about, keeping an animal in one place that's designated for it. And the lack of tolerance, the lack of connection with the environment, and the complete sort of anger towards anything that inconveniences us. This is something that I see more and more. And of course, I was born in Delhi, and my mother used to swim in the Yamuna River. I can't even imagine doing that, in just one generation. Things have changed so much in Delhi. But that leopard that was in Delhi, it was many years ago. And even now, there's a leopard in Delhi. And even now, they're thinking of baiting it and catching it. And at the time that I started researching for the leopard, at the time that WII decided to bait the leopard, it was something that I wrote about even at that time. It was outrageous to me, and today it is set. It's a protocol that happens everywhere. The moment they see leopards, they put up a trap. They put up traps for leopards inside reserve forests, inside buffer areas or protected zones or protected areas. And I think it's because we feel that we can control them. And it also comes with a complete lack of knowledge of the behavior of the animal, that the leopard does not want to be touched. It does not want us to show this kindness towards it. And you're talking about tolerance. I have a chapter in this book, which is a personal favorite, about a man who lost his arm to a crocodile, but he raises those crocodiles. And in his village in Chhattisgarh, Kotni Samar, they actually give lifts to crocodiles on the back of their carts. Because a juvenile crocodile, walks from the wetland and goes into the fields, and it gets stranded there. And these guys come and they lower their carts, and the juvenile climbs up, and everybody lives with the crocodile. The same is true for parts of Gujarat as well, right? So they actually feel, as you said, their life is richer. It's one aspect of their life. The fact that there's an animal is one aspect of their life, and their kind of conservation has no funding, it has no speeches, it has no bells and whistles. It's just a way of life. And I think we're very confused where we are. We want to be modern, but being modern doesn't mean not having common sense or completely forgetting, ways in which we can coexist. I think modernity today has become about control and
Mhm.
feeling like we can control every aspect of our life. And I think to me, a lot of conservation, and I'm a practicing conservationist, it's just tragedy after tragedy. I wanted to make sure the book is not totally sad though, which is why Babaji, the crocodile guy, is in the book. And, so is the biologist who walks into a cobra and nothing happens. And the whole chapter about the snakes and king cobras and the cobras is about the fact that they don't always bite you. This idea that the moment you see a snake, you need to rescue it is so problematic.
Mhm.
And even I wrote about the Statue of Unity project that, they moved 15 crocodiles. They moved around 200 crocodiles now, and they're
Yeah.
calling it a rescue. And in
Yes.
fact, Rom is in the book saying that it should not be done, of course, but it got done
Yeah.
anyway. I think
Yeah.
we have a hyper, we just want to show that we can do something. And I think we're doing exactly the opposite of what the animal needs us to do.
Yeah. So I think, so you mentioned rescue as well, and I think it's really important that we think about the vocabulary that we use. And to this, I mean, rescue is becoming a massive issue in the country, I think, and it's not based on any science whatsoever. In fact, it goes against the learnings that we've gained from a lot of research, where snakes are being captured, or crocodiles are being captured, or leopards, or any animal. We look at capture and relocation. Let's not call it rescue anymore. We look at capture and relocation as a conservation tool. Now, the problem with this is, in India, I feel what we do most often is measure effort uh, and intent rather than impact and result. And so rescuers all over the country are gaining accolades for doing something noble. Now, to start with, I don't believe that conservation is anything noble or beautiful or anything. It's something that we desperately need to do, akin to getting vaccinated during a pandemic. So it's with things like vocabulary. What do you feel about the anthropomorphizing of animals? Um, we give them human or humanoid emotions, characters, behaviors, and we sort of draw parallels. What do you feel about that?
I think it's something that we comes very naturally to us. We only like things that are maternal. We like women who are maternal or animals that are maternal. So if you say that a snake has babies, or the king cobra is incubating her eggs, she'll sit next to her nest even if the eggs are broken. People
Mhm.
like that, but there is a danger that it goes overboard. And in this book, I've tried to show the animal for what it is. It's really important to me that a wild animal should be seen as what it is. So yes, you have venomous snakes, but that doesn't mean it's an evil guy. So there's a part of the book that says it is not evil, it just is what it is. It has venom for a reason. And also, its life's mission is not to disturb us. And I completely agree with you about this rescue thing as well. There's a lot of blurring of animal welfare and wildlife conservation, and it's creating serious problems also in terms of when the ideology clashes and it actually hurts, say, an endangered species, like the whole issue of removal of dogs, for example, or removal of cats or any kind of introduced animal which is seriously threatening other species. And the question comes in, all animals are the same, but then I don't think they are the same because of what we have done.
Yes.
And therefore, to go back to your point about the word rescue, it's a very problematic word. And we are a country where rescue centers will always flourish.
Yes.
And it will become analogous with conservation because it's an easy thing to fund in that sense. I mean, I'm not undermining the efforts of rescue centers, they are important, but they cannot be the solitary focus in the same way that conservation breeding cannot be the solitary focus. The first focus has to be to save the habitat and save the animal in its habitat on its own terms. And so I just, for me, a wild animal is trying to live life on its own terms with its own agency. And instead of seeing it as a man or a woman, we should see it as a male or a female of that species.
Mhm.
So it doesn't become a good father just because it's doing something that our fathers have done for us. It's not going to
Yeah.
teach the alphabet to its kids. It's a different kind of intelligence. And in the butterfly chapter, I'm talking about butterflies, how they seem to exist in their own world. They kind of they're so dreamy. But then it's also my perception of the butterfly being dreamy. It didn't sign up to be dreamy. It just is like that. And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, I just want people to accept animals for the characters that they are. They don't need to be like us.
Mhm.
We are not the final yardstick in what is good.
Yes, nor are we the pivot around which everything revolves either. In fact, I'm glad that you said that, the snake's purpose in life is not to come and bite us. In fact, any snake, I can wager my life on it that there is no snake that will chase us, right?
Yeah.
The only reason a snake would want anything to do with us is if it could eat us, and those would be just really large, massive snakes that could do that. And they are ambush predators. They're not active predators, right?
Yeah.
So they'll sit and wait for us to go to them. But uh, but yes, like you've mentioned, and I really uh, I do like to go back to the whole rescuer conversation, because I believe it's very pertinent in India today. Because of, do you feel that we're in a bit of a flux, confused between conservation concepts that have come in from around the world, uh, and how we used to live? You pointed out that conservation is a way of life in Chhattisgarh, with the crocodiles and the village folk there. Um, so I mean, so I truly believe that someone who's just working on their own organic farm is a much bigger conservationist than most large NGOs or whatever, because that really is the model that would work. And if we talk about what models would work, I think it needs to be decentralized, which is why even something like when you speak about the Great Indian Bustard and power lines and solar farms and everything threatening this habitat, right? This marubhumi, as you call it. Um, uh, we're talking, we're still talking about corporates, about large corporations and huge for-profit endeavors and initiatives, not about, every household having solar panels on top of it, enabling their own power, bringing it back to the grid, and creating whatever we need from a grassroots level upwards. So I think with all these so-called solutions that we have, green solutions and all that, um, they're really in they're really dysfunctional because they are not the solution. Having thousands of acres of solar farms and massive multi megawatt windmills, those are not the solution to it. It needs to be much more at a grassroots level. What do you feel about how we're treating environmental conservation?
I completely agree with you. The guys who do coal mining have now gone into solar, and suddenly, they're talking about climate change and all of that. And it's actually a land grab today. And I don't know if you saw the recent spate of articles saying the Great Indian Bustard is a slow and stupid bird, basically, that it
Yes. Yeah.
can't see. It's so, matlab, it is such a pain, basically calling it a dim-witted creature. Now, the thing
Mhm.
is that, the last places for the Great Indian Bustard, Thar and Desert National Park, and Kutch. These are also places that get many other kinds of biodiversity, which would go into the wires. So lesser floricans, which are going to be critically endangered, they also are in the GIB area. And so are so many migratory raptors, and in the case of Kutch, so many flamingos, large-bodied birds, which are going to go inside the electric wires, and they are going to die in collision. Those wires are so scary. Each time I go to Thar, it looks more scary than last time because it's not a wire, it's a mesh of wires. I think as a country, we just love these big projects, and a small project just will not do. And I've been working on the Andaman and Nicobar issues as well, in which they want to make a transshipment port in Galathea
Mhm.
by denotifying the largest breeding area of leatherback turtles. They want to make an airport and a power plant and this huge port. They want to make a lot of stuff in Lakshadweep as well on top of the coral reef. And I think the point is, it's a complete failure of imagination. We don't understand where we are situating the project. We have no interest in where actually it's going to be. What is that land about? What is it that that area needs? Or, how would you, these solar panels, for example, need a lot of water, and
Mhm.
we are talking about making them in the driest parts of India, right? Which is Athar and Kutch. And similarly for making, a huge port in the middle of nowhere, which is on an island, in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, to give, this so-called competition to Singapore. I mean, I think what gets the government's heart racing are these huge projects. And there's also the white-bellied heron in this book, which is threatened by these huge dams that they want to make in the Himalayas. And, I always feel that whoever makes these projects does not fear the sea or does not fear the mountains. Only somebody who does not fear the sea or mountains, basically has never been there, would make such projects, because it's really scary to build on the coastline today.
Yeah.
That would be Lathia, for example, or make huge dams in the Himalayas today. With climate change, with so many extreme events, and I just, to me, I just feel that the common sense is lacking. So even if you don't look at it from an environmental point of view, even if you don't look at it from an ideological point of view, it's scary just in terms of the facts, in terms of the whether it can happen, in terms of
Mhm.
common sense, it's not going to happen. And
Yes.
of course, the answers are decentralized completely. And in the Amul Falcon chapter, for example, the conservation is done by the community. It's not
Yes.
me or an NGO or somebody coming from outside, and we need solar power, but that doesn't mean we need 700 square kilometers of land in
Mhm.
Kutch, which is what foundation stone was laid for. You know,
Yes.
that's just a land grab. And
Mhm.
again, these areas are described as wastelands. Again, it's a failure of imagination because it doesn't look familiar to us, doesn't look valuable to us. And we have such few places left now, I feel,
Mhm.
which actually are wilderness or which actually are natural ecosystems which don't have too much interference by us. And we want to kind of create a hierarchy even for that, that, this
Yeah.
should be on sale for solar power. So
Yes.
I've actually been telling everyone that we need to relook this idea of something that's green. So we have these sustainable development goals. They should not come at the cost of biodiversity.
Mhm.
You cannot have climate action on the backs of threatened species or threatened ecosystems. And I feel, I'm sure you'll agree, that we now need a ranking for ecosystems, not just for species, right?
Yes.
We have threatened ecosystems in India, and we better start, looking at how much of each type of ecosystem is left and what we can do to preserve it.
Yes. Yeah. I
Sand,
think. Sorry, go on.
sand, sand dunes, for example,
Yes.
so threatened by solar power today.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, we use the word wasteland way too loosely. Uh, to me, a wasteland would be like a factory, or I mean, that's a waste of land. I mean,
Yes,
by definition. Yeah.
yeah. Or some place that's been contaminated or degraded. That would be the
Mhm.
only place that's a wasteland, not a functioning ecosystem. Yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah.
now the other thing when we talk about animals and biodiversity and their habitats, right? What do we how we always talk about their habitats and as something separate from us, right?
Mhm.
And so people, I remember a few years ago we were up in Arunachal Pradesh, and yeah, I completely resonated with the white-bellied heron um, uh, piece chapter, because it's just, I mean, Arunachal is just so beautiful, and there are parts of it that are still such expansive wilderness and truly wild. Uh, but what we feel, oh sorry, no, sorry. So we were there, and the whole village was up in arms. People were bringing their guns out, spears, everything. They were really upset because this tiger had come out of Pake and was attacking their mithun. And of course, instead of just leaving one mithun that had been killed to be eaten, they kept bringing the mithun back. The tiger killed back, so the tiger kept uh, well, killing more mithun. And one of the tribe folk actually said these were Nishi, and they spoke to there was a WWF personnel there, and a couple of folks from the forest department. They spoke to them and they said, take your tiger back to your forest. And that's the rift that has been created. And I feel this whole, the the animals need to go into their habitat. We need to protect habitats for animals. It Whatever the intent is, it creates an us and them. And I very strongly believe that the best way for conservation to go forward is to not just protect these so-called the protected areas and these last semi-pristine places, but to grow them. And the only way we can do that is if we start transforming our space around us to bring in animals, right? Or to allow animals just to be. And unfortunately, and this will go back again to the whole animal welfare thing and actual conservation, where we talk about things like sparrows, for example, or pigeons or crows, where it's not really about, I think you've frozen. Can you hear me?
You have frozen as well, but I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right. So, yeah, so basically, I feel it's not about, it really isn't about protecting space somewhere else. It's about sharing space with,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, no animal has signed a sale deed, right? And no animal has got a khata on its name. So it's just about what it's space that we just decided that we could own. And I think that is the fundamental issue where we believe that we can own space. Okay. And this might get into a very fluffy ideological conversation. But if we own space, when people ask me simple questions like, why is there a snake in my house? And like, because your house is nice. It's hot outside, it's cool in your house, or it's super wet outside and there's a dry place in your house. It's as simple as that. You're making a great place for you, which is also really great for a lot of other snakes or a lot of other animals. So it really is about our choice whether we want to conserve or not. And speaking of choice, a lot of people are willing to conserve elsewhere, somewhere else. Avni the tiger, all these other things, somewhere else, right? But
Name, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
No, I mean, I agree, and that's why there's so much Delhi in this book, because I am from Delhi. Delhi is my home, and every time I see a wild animal, I feel, thank God, I'm not alone, because I think life would be very boring with just people. I don't think people are interesting enough, and even over here, you do have large animals, like you have peacocks, you have leopards, you have, well, sambar deer sometimes come to Delhi, and of course we have nilgai as well. We have jackals, etc. So I completely agree. Conservation is not heroism. I really, feel very. I feel quite disturbed when people portray themselves as heroes or pioneers. I find it a bit of a colonial motif almost. When people have this triumphant kind of feeling because they're in conservation or they've done something to save an animal. I think I'm not of that view at all. I think I agree with what you said, which is that it's kind of sharing a life, sharing space, if not a life, and sharing space, and also finding enablers in which making that sharing a little bit more easy.
Mhm.
So I always get into huge arguments with urban conservationists who believe that conservation is that other place, where you go on the weekend or somebody else has to bear the brunt of it. And which is why Avni is in this book. But Avni is not a happy story, not because Avni only got shot, but also because there are all these people who don't care, what the tiger does. They
Mhm.
want the tiger to live. They found a cause they want to fight for. But then they're not the ones dying,
Yes.
because of as an outcome. And obviously, when you have dangerous animals, there's always the question of possible injury. And I think we cannot look away. We can't look away from the kind of losses that happen, or the kind of injuries that can happen. Uh, it's like when there was demonetization, we had a complete lack of empathy towards poor people, or we had a complete lack of empathy towards anybody who was complaining, or anybody who was in more trouble than us. And we kept saying, the middle class kept saying, it's okay, it'll be fine, give time to the government, completely looking away from the fact that some people are actually dying because of it, right? So it's
Mhm.
similar with wildlife conservation. It's almost very neoliberal in the way that it pans out, that we feel somebody else should pay the price or discomfort. And how can that work? It's not sustainable. So for me, I think we need to make life a bit easier for those who bear the brunt of it.
Okay.
I think so. If it's compensation, or if it's coming up with technologies or whatever it is, but certainly the idea that we fund conservation and we enjoy looking at a wild animal sometimes few times of the year when we go to a tiger reserve, and then the villager needs to kind of live with it. Otherwise, it's a very wrong view. It's a
Mhm.
very colonial view, right, in which you're separate from the rest of everyone. You're the ruling class and you're kind of separate. And I also feel that the worst enemies of conservation are not those people. It is
Mhm.
corporate and it is the government. I'm not anti-government, but in terms of violations, it's the biggest violations are by government companies, or the PPP model companies.
Yes.
They are the biggest violators. And you may lose one animal or two animals, but if you lose the habitat, it's over, right? It's
Yeah.
irrevocable.
Yes.
And we are losing chunks of habitat every month, to mining, to the solar farms, to roads, to highways. Those are the real issues we need to talk about, not, I think it's easy to gun for the communities. It's
Hmm.
easy to gun for the villager. It's easy to say villager shouldn't hunt. I mean,
Yeah.
hunting is problematic, but
Yeah. It pales in
they're not
comparison.
they're not the worst aggressor. The
Yes.
worst aggressors are way bigger and way
Yeah.
more dangerous. So I wanted to make sure in this book that I give a fair voice to the community as well. And in the Amur Falcon story, again, when I work on that Amur Falcon issue and I have a field site in Nagaland, the way the rest of us treat the Nagas, you
Hmm.
know, it shouldn't happen in 2021, right? The disgust, the loathing, the moralizing, that these
Yes.
people eat dogs, or these people, how can they eat falcons? Falcon is
Hmm.
not something to eat, and I think the moralizing attitude also reflects in movements like Avni, in which again they're like, we've given compensation to the victim, so what is the problem?
Yeah.
So we can't. This is not conservation. This is classism, and
Yes.
it's a kind of a lack of. Let me just say that a lack of empathy cannot, propagate conservation. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if they think that the end justifies the means. It does not. And if we are serious, we want to do something for India. We should keep our eyes open to what are the big changes to habitat that are happening, and demand that they shouldn't happen. So then all the people who take part in the marches to save Mollem in Goa, or to save the Aravali's in North India, or save even a small forest like RA in Bombay, I think that's important. I think that to me is something a city person can do, because everybody can't, doesn't have land to grow stuff. But that's a kind of environmentalism of people that is much more important than throwing stones at villagers.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Go on. Sorry.
and
Yeah. So I
on
completely
public.
agree with that. And it's, I mean, yeah, and I completely agree with the whole, we need to fight uh, uh, corporate and government level um, assailing of our environment and our forests and everything. And yes, I mean, the Molem, the entire movement in Molem was very inspirational, and they did a brilliant job, and they're continuing to fight that good fight. Um but I also feel that it's important for each one of us to see that we're also causing the death of tigers. We're also causing I mean, with everything that we do. Uh, no government would have the power to do these things if we weren't also slaves to a complete capitalistic society, right? We still want our new things. We still want, to pander to our vanities, and we still want, the next new model of whatever, or we use our clothes far less than we should. It's there's Those are the changes that we really need to make as well. I'm reminded of uh, during a conference we call the Canopy Conference that happened in Bangalore a few years ago. Um, Someone drew cited a study that had pointed out that the holding capacity for the planet was 2 billion people, right? And this one guy who is one of my favorites, he's always asking the hard questions, and he stood up and he said, "But sir, what do you mean? Do you mean 2 billion Texans or 2 billion Jarwa tribals?" And that's the crux of it, isn't it? That is the crux of it. I mean, as politically incorrect as that is, it's accurate, right? And it's about what we are using. And I feel it's very, like you said, it's very easy to blame the in your face, guy who's shot a tiger, or, killed something else, and or even the corporates. And they are the biggest villains, I agree, but so are we. And I think it's really important that we start seeing that everything that we do, the things that the wants that we have, the excesses that we enjoy, are really contributing in a big way to all this thing. Every time we waste food, for example, as my grandmother would constantly say, right, there isn't enough food for people somewhere else. But every time we waste food, we're throwing away something that could have actually been used for, or we could have used less, right? So each time we use less, we need to produce less, and it really is, as idealistic as it is, and I know this is not going to happen, certainly not overnight, but people need to, we all need to start thinking about, do I really need that? Why
Yeah.
can I just chill? Do I need to travel? You know, the or even this voyeuristic approach to our love for nature. Let's go on a safari. That's not nature. That is just, that's spectator sport, right? It really isn't being in touch with nature. And and going back to vocabulary again, like things like ecotourism, things like rescue, things like even conservation. Uh, so a large corporate who's giving blood money for a certain project is not conservation, or some massive, you know rich family who decides to do one small little fundraising gala is not conservation. It's about proportion. Conservation is about really doing as much as we can now because it's critical, right? We went
Okay.
into absolute orbit because of COVID, because the end was so near. The thing is, where we are right now is pretty much that. This is like a nice wake up call, saying that this is, we're in big trouble. And yeah, I'm trying to think right now of how I can wind this up, but I'm just talking. But yes, okay.
The way that I look at it, I think, it's very difficult to clamp down on desire and clamp down on, luxuries in life. I think everybody wants to have a life in which they feel pampered. But, the way I think one way to look at it is it's like a relationship. You give and you take, and, it's a relationship between two people. It's about being there for each other, listening to each other, etc. I think we should feel that same thing with nature, that you can't just be taking, you also have to replenish it. Like, it's not an inexhaustible pot of gold. It's like, you can't
Mhm.
just I mean, how many malls are you going to make, or how many pairs of shoes does a person need? I think we should look at nature as something that we are in a relationship with, rather than something like it's a product that we are using. I think we look at it as a product, right? Everything about nature is a commodity. It's not a commodity. I think it we are there because of nature, and we should maybe feel a little bit more indebted to it, perhaps. I mean, I feel during the pandemic it was so difficult because one couldn't go out anywhere. I
Mhm.
really felt depressed because I couldn't be amongst trees or couldn't go to the biodiversity parks and all.
Okay. Yeah, it's well, that's a rough one. Uh, I feel very blessed. Even though
Yeah.
we're locked down, I have outside, so I can go
So
out and
not
breathe.
every person is lucky as you. I know. I was jealous of all my friends who, live in slightly more country setting, or have, big farms or gardens. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Ours is just space, and we're trying to let it go as wild as possible. So, uh, the good thing with that is that I don't have to commute to work at all because Russell's vipers, two of them are actually on our property now, so we still get all our data from right here.
So that must be your favorite snake because he drew you as a Russell's viper.
I don't know if it's my favorite snake, but I really, uh, I'm learning more about them now. And that's one thing with snakes, we really know so little with any species of snake. But yeah, each time we spend time with any snake, we just say, "Oh, wow, that's a really smart snake." It's um, and I hope we keep learning, and we still have so much to go that we're going to keep learning for a long time.
So which is
So
your favorite snake?
I don't have a favorite snake actually. I like lots of different snakes for lots of different reasons. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that the the stealth of a Russell's viper and its ability to track down its prey after it's bitten it. There's so many new things that we're learning about them. The human-like intelligence of a king cobra, the
Yeah.
the heat sensing ability of a pit viper. There's tons and tons of different reasons to be uh, to really enjoy different snakes. So I don't have a single favorite snake. So.
Yeah. No, I don't know why people think reptiles are lower animals. And so many people have asked me why I have included reptiles in my book because they expected more mammals for some reason. And
Mm,
why would you write about Magarmach? It's not even critically endangered. Or why would you write about the cobra? It's
yeah.
not even endangered. But I don't know, everybody, you talk to anybody and they say reptiles are so scary, and I feel that maybe it's an inherited fear. Like, I, for example, feel scared of broken glass. When I see it, a shiver runs down my spine. And when people I know would see a reptile, they say they have a shiver down their spine. But I do think that repulsion is something they've learned, it's probably something their parents taught them, or maybe popular culture taught them, perhaps.
It's definitely conditioned. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
But we work with a lot of people who were initially scared of snakes or reptiles or whatever, and it's just a question of knowing them, I guess, and getting to well, maybe not understand because that's a long way to go, but just giving them a chance. And the moment people see that they're not, I think one thing we need to realize is that we are really not the center of every animal's universe, you know. So, yeah, so they don't want to come after humans, and they don't. Yeah, Jennifer Lopez lied in Anaconda, so they're
yeah,
actually slugs. So, yeah, so did Devi. You mentioned her as well, and
yeah,
but yeah, it's that age old thing of self glorification where
mm,
there are old entries in gazettes where it talks about a king cobra chasing a man on a horse for a few kilometers, which is not physiologically possible for that king cobra to do. Even if it could achieve those speeds, it would die from exhaustion and hypoglycemia in a fraction of that distance. So it's yeah, it's just basically people making it out to making themselves out to the rescue syndrome. I'm going to start calling it that. Look at me,
yeah,
I'm so cool. But the truth
yeah.
is, the only reason we can handle a snake is because
The
it
se-
doesn't want to bite us.
yeah, the selfie with the cobra, the kiss of the cobra, which is actually
Yes.
the name of the chapter. Don't kiss
Yes.
a cobra. Why do
Yeah.
people kiss cobras? I don't understand. It's such a lack of consent, apart from being a death wish,
Yes.
right?
Single sex schools is the problem.
Sorry, what?
Single sex schools is a problem.
Yeah,
Everything should be
make
co-ed from the beginning.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
I'm also really happy that you mentioned Manjeet Kaur in that section as well. She's one, but she is an exception. She is in India. If you look at people who rescue snakes, I could count good ones on my fingers, and
yeah,
probably have a couple of fingers spare because
yeah,
it's not. I mean, people, even the ones who think they're doing good and want to do stuff for the snake, go in with the mindset of I need to catch this snake,
yeah,
not with the mindset of listen, it's not necessary, it's fine, I'll only catch it if I absolutely have to. And
yeah,
and then don't move it because that kills the snake, so what's the point of rescue then?
yeah.
So anyway, I think I'm not sure if we have a time limit on this. I just got a message from Ravi. We have 7 minutes more.
Well, you should tell me how you like the book, or
I
if you
really
like
enjoy
the
the book. It's very vivid. You have this ability of being able to describe. Like I said, you make Delhi sound magical, and no, I can't. I could
so
see
you
it. I could see it. I could see what you see, but I just don't agree with that.
have
But
to.
in all
Well,
fairness, it's not just Delhi. It's any city for
I can
me.
take you to those parts of the city which are magical, and they're magical because they have those animals in them.
Hmm. And
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah.
it just takes a little bit, those biodiversity parks, or even little parks in the city, makes
Hmm.
the butterfly float, in front of you in the red light, and you have these people trees breaking through stone everywhere in Delhi.
Mm.
butterfly will come and sit on that people tree, and you have so many trees in Delhi still.
Yes.
And when those trees flower, it's just something to see. And it is a parallel city all the time. You know, the peacocks call at the end of the day, and the
Mm.
brain fever bird is calling all day long now in summer. And
Mhm.
I wish people would see that parallel city because it's unseen, you know. I
Mhm.
think in cities, people need to see it because, unlike in other settings where you can live in benign neglect, in cities, unless people want that animal or that nature, you know, it's
Mhm.
going to get shunted out if people
Okay.
don't want it. A city is, of course, a little different. And thank God for the animals. It would just be a shithole otherwise.
Yeah, I completely, well, it already is pretty much, but I'm spoiled, so I can't comment on that. But having said that, I mean, you talk about animals in places like Delhi. It's just testament to the resilience that wildness has, right? I mean, so when we moved here about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was an intensively farmed place, flat, dead soil, uh, just reeling from pesticides and fertilizers and everything. And all we did is start mulching. We didn't do anything, and we've been planting a few trees and stuff like that. But 6 or 7 years down the line, I mean, there've been leopards for quite a while, even probably before we started mulching. But there's been so we have resident civets, we have two species of civets, lots of jungle cats, um, uh, over 160 species of birds that we've seen here on the property, uh, and even the mouse deer, which is what I've been most excited about.
It's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, it's it and yeah, rusty spotted cat and stuff like that. And these animals um, are navigating their way through this checkerboard of plantations and fields and villages and people and and hunters and roads and traffic and everything, and still clinging on and maybe not thriving but certainly surviving. So
Yeah.
but that brings hope if we start thinking about what we can do around us to just give them those little toe holes of uh, you know support. That's all they need, just a place or a space where they'll be tolerated, where there might be some food. And I don't mean putting up water dishes and all those other things. I'm talking about just giving them a natural space to be in, and it's one that preferably isn't manicured because yeah, but that's more my personal thing than anything else. But just little few wild spaces in every city would make a big difference. Bombay is very fortunate to have the Sanjay Gandhi National Park there. um, the Chennai has the Gindi Deer Park, which of course is going through tremendous pressures. But all these places, Bangalore has Bannerghatta, uh, which when I was a kid growing up, Bangalore was, I mean, Bannerghatta was far outside Bangalore, and Bangalore is now encroached on most of it. And yeah, it's actually, they're probably going to just regularize all that because you'd have to remove millions of people from there, and houses and factories and everything. But these spaces are sacrosanct. They should be much more protected than anything that's further afield. They need to have an absolute no. And unfortunately, historically, about 10 or 15 years or 20 years ago to now, they've really been abused by the real estate mafia, by governments, by corporations, just to maximize profit. And I think that's something that we also could start learning from, that when we reach for profit maximization is when we hurt everything else. When we reach for just for profit, or just without having to you know cut corners or milk everything dry, that might be a good first step to take. Just take a little less.
Yes, I agree. And you know, my research in Sariska Tiger Reserve, Sariska is so sad now because it's completely cut off from the Aravallis, right? So it
Mhm.
used to be connected to other forests. Now it's a complete island. So everything that gets done in Sariska, it's like the tigers can only live inside. They can't ever go out. And I spent a lot of time with the villagers, and depending on where the village is in relation to the road, when the ones closer to the road were the ones who were much more hostile to the tiger because they wanted the city to come to the village.
Mm.
But it was mining and quarrying that has completely cut off Sariska from the rest of the Aravallis.
Mm.
And I completely agree. These are the last precious places, and in the city, we need nature more than anything.
Mm.
Because otherwise, it's the first place where you get disease is the city, right?
Mhm.
Not just because there's so many people, but because it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Cities are super unhealthy, dengue, chikungunya, all the diseases that come from the airport, and not just COVID, but many other diseases.
Yeah.
So we actually need nature more. And in the dolphin chapter, the Ganga is getting so noisy. So it's not just land, it's also water. Like, I completely agree, maximizing profit at what cost? Like, we can't just destroy everything. Coal barges going down the Ganga, the world's holiest river, it kind of makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
unholy.
It
Yeah.
is absolutely. The Ganga is, yeah, anything but holy. Uh, Maybe I shouldn't have said that while it's being recorded, but anyway, I think we
I
have
think
to end.
Ganga is holy, but we don't treat it like it's holy, right?
Exactly.
If it was holy, we wouldn't have barges of coal that are barges of fly ash, toxic fly ash going down the river, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fly ash should not be carried like that.
Well, yeah, and the Ganga needs to be left alone for on various fronts. But I think that's all we have time for. Neha, thank you so much for your time and for writing this lovely book. Uh, on behalf of Goobes Book Republic, I'd like to thank Neha and say, guys, pick up the book. It's a really wonderful read, and if you'd like to pick